Hi again, everybody. Welcome to the Bricks and Bleachers podcast. All things Chicago Cubs in under 10 minutes. Almost 10% of the season is behind us. Cubs have played 15, and we'll share some thoughts on what we've learned so far, make a couple roster predictions, and our This and That segment features news from around the league. It was a rough one last night on ESPN's Sunday Night Baseball. Cubs down 13-4. They lose 2 of 3 over the weekend to the Atlanta Braves. Kyle Hendricks last night rocked in the first inning, giving up 6 runs on 4 home runs. He did recover, and it was manageable after a couple of innings. He made it through 4 innings, but after 3, the Cubs had already made it a 6-3 ball game. Certainly doable at that point, but the Braves added 1 run in the 4th, and they blew it wide open in the 6th, putting up 6, including a grand slam. So the Braves win last night 13-4. Cubs won by the same score on Saturday. That game featured 6 Cubs home runs, including 2 each from Chris Bryant and Wilson Contreras. Saturday's win, really the only game of the year where the Cubs offense has really come alive. Cubs have a record of 6-9, which is pretty incredible because Saturday's game is only the 3rd time of this season where the team has put up more than 4 runs. They have scored 5 on 2 occasions and then put up 13 on Saturday. So pretty incredible to be 6-9 with the offense sputtering the way it has. Cubs' April schedule loaded up with a bunch of home games, certainly more so than in previous recent years. All but 6 of their games through April 25 will be at home. More on the upcoming schedule in a moment, but let's look back at last week. The 6-game road trip, it was rough. 3 games in Pittsburgh, 3 in Milwaukee. Cubs did squeak out 1 win in each city, but they only scored 13 runs combined in those 6 games. And through Sunday's games, Cubs are dead last in the majors in batting average, hitting just 192. There were a couple social media posts last week, you may have seen them, highlighting the fact that if you take all of the plate appearances of pitchers across Major League Baseball, they had a higher batting average than the Chicago Cubs at that point. I think the Cubs were around 150 at that point. I think that was maybe last Tuesday or so. They're now up to 192, but to be batting under 200 through 15 games, that is incredible. Incredibly bad. Really, the only offensive category where the Cubs are putting up numbers is home runs, 22 so far, and through Sunday's games, that's 3rd most in the majors. You could say that's a bright spot. I say it's reverse because the Cubs at the plate, it's feast or famine, and famine comes far more than feast. It seems like home run or strikeout accounts for roughly 80% of plate appearances. I'm sure the actual numbers don't hash out to be exactly that bad, but it certainly seems like it. Very few regular base hits, no concept of small ball, everyone swinging for the fence. I think pitching is definitely what's carrying them so far. The bullpen among the best in the majors in terms of ERA. Starters have struggled, but it is a new look rotation for the Cubs. But one thing seems to be happening almost every time, and that is the starters running into trouble, especially as they come around deeper into the 2nd and 3rd time through the order. Cubs pitching seems to be prone to giving up that big inning. Team RA just under 5, 3rd highest in the majors through Sunday. And walks are a killer as well. No one issues more walks than the Cubs, 75 through 15 games. That's 5 walks per game. Aside from a couple walks last night, Craig Kimbrell, I think, pitching better so far this year than he has at any point during his stint with the Chicago Cubs. So we kind of gloss over pitching other than saying it is a bright spot. Let's look at the position players. And for the most part, the core of position players remains largely intact. Contreras, Rizzo, Bryant, Baez. You've still got Jason Hayward, David Bodie, Ian Happ getting regular time. And new this year in left field, Jock Peterson in place of Kyle Schwarber, who is now in Washington. On the bench, or at least splitting time, in second base, you've got Eric Sogard. Jake Marisnick, a great pickup. He's a great defensive center fielder. I think he's an upgrade from Albert Almora Jr. Austin Romine is a backup to Wilson Contreras, now that Victor Caratini is in San Diego. And for now, Matt Duffy is also on the Cubs bench. I think Nico Horner, the young guy, second base prospect, I think he will eventually take that last spot on the Cubs roster, but he is beginning this season with the minor league organization. Now, pitching, John Lester now in D.C., Yu Darvish in San Diego, Jose Quintana and Tyler Chatwood gone as well. So Kyle Hendricks is the anchor of the staff. He's been the opening day starter the last couple of years. Cubs landed Zach Davies from San Diego in that trade with Yu Darvish. Davies is pretty good, number 2. He's off to a decent start. Trevor Williams looking really good. First couple outings with the Cubs. He's pitched against the team elsewhere in the division, and Jake Arrieta is back. He's certainly not going to repeat what we saw from him in 2015 and 2016, but if he can stay healthy, I think Jake Arrieta is good for 10 or 12 wins at least. Let's talk a little bit about the Cubs roster. Many of the core guys have contracts expiring at the end of this year. Bryant, Rizzo, Baez. At first, I thought you would see 2 of those 3 returning. Now, I don't think you're going to see more than 1. And I think even 1 might be going out on a limb. Now, obviously, a lot can happen in terms of what happens as this season plays out. With 90% of the season still ahead of us, how will the team be performing in terms of wins and losses? How about health considerations or individual performance? My gut tells me Anthony Rizzo is done with the Cubs. The 2 sides could not come up with an agreement during the spring, and I think that would be a shame because Anthony Rizzo is a proven leader. His performance is solid at the plate and in the field, and I think a lot of Rizzo's future is dependent on the other guys. Chris Bryant, I think he's the most valuable piece in terms of a trade if he stays healthy. If he continues his strong start, I think Chris Bryant may be a great July target for other teams, especially if the Cubs are not in postseason contention. Javi Baez also has a contract expiring. He will command a big salary. ESPN last night reporting the team made him a pretty generous offer last year, which was turned down. So I think Baez would probably be my first in terms of trying to build around for the future, but really that may depend on his performance this year. He still strikes out a lot. He is fun to watch defensively. He does make things happen on the base paths, but who knows? I think if Anthony Rizzo is back with the Cubs in 2022, it's not because they went out of their way to accommodate Anthony Rizzo. I think it's because KB went elsewhere and they're deciding not to throw big bucks towards Javi Baez. You know, the Cubs got off to a very slow start. I think it was in 2018, playing around 500 baseball through late May before winning at a ridiculous pace the rest of the year that year. We will see what happens the rest of this year. All right, our This and That segment, news and notes from around the league. There have been 2 no-hitters so far in 2021. Joe Musgrove threw a no-hitter for the Padres on April 9th. Carlos Rodon threw one for the White Sox last Wednesday. And if you go back to September 13 of 2020, Alec Mills threw a no-hitter for the Cubs. Victor Caratini caught that one, and then he caught the Joe Musgrove no-hitter a couple of weeks ago. So pretty cool milestone there for Victor Caratini. Now, let's stay elsewhere in the National League Central. Cubs and Brewers played last week. I mentioned that earlier. Corbin Burns of the Brewers. He has 30 strikeouts in his first 3 starts this year, and not only is that pretty incredible, he's done that without issuing any walks. Only a handful of pitchers ever have thrown 30 or more strikeouts in 3 games without issuing a walk. And we'll stay in the National League Central. There are 2 divisional foes of the Cubs in the top 5 of MLB.com's power rankings. Reds move up to 4th this week. Brewers right behind them at 5th, moving up from 14th. Cubs are 22nd on that list. Almost out of time, but a quick preview of the Cubs and Mets meeting for 3 this week at Wrigley Field. That series gets underway tomorrow night, Tuesday night on ESPN, 7:40 first pitch. Jake Arrieta on the mound for the Cubs. You have to be confident in a good outing from him and hopefully all of the Cubs pitchers, because we've talked a lot about Cubs offensive struggles so far on this podcast. The Mets are comparable. They are 2 of the worst teams in the league at the plate, so we may see some quick fast-paced games, pitcher-dominated games the next 3 nights. I think Thursday, especially intriguing. Jacob deGrom and Trevor Williams lined up as the starting pitchers in that one. Looking ahead to the weekend, Cubs wrap up the homestand with Milwaukee, 2:20 Eastern. Your first pitch on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Brewers won 2 of 3 between those teams meeting in Milwaukee last week. All right, that's the first episode of this 2021 season. We'll do it again soon. Please subscribe so you do not miss out. All things Cubs in under 10 minutes. Subscribe on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, among others. Follow us. Offer your thoughts on Twitter, too, at Bricks Bleachers. This is the Bricks and Bleachers Podcast.